Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming here to watch this video. For a long time, I've had a routine of every day, or at least trying to every day, think just for an hour around lunch. I'd sit down in silence, stop, put my phone away, and just think about different issues, different topics, um, whatever I felt was most useful to think about at that time. And I try to look at everything from a very objective standpoint. I would take everything from both angles, criticize myself, criticize others, others just put opinions and my own opinions, of course. And so here's the little experiment. I'm going to try to record those sessions while playing Minecraft. Honestly, this is meant to be kind of a podcast style. I just don't want to sit in front of a camera. So you're free to tap out or do anything else while listening to this. The Minecraft thing is just honestly there for distraction for those who need some visual stimulation, and partially for myself to keep myself engaged while thinking about this. So I want to thank you for being here again. And today I want to talk a little bit about, or discuss the meaning of life and why Ikigai is not it. Well, not so much the meaning of life, but what's like the purpose of each individual person's life. Up to this, I started getting the idea for this when I read a book called Ikigai, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. And while the book wasn't what I expected, it's not a bad book in and of itself. But it introduces Ikigai and every other thing, like most of the sources I can find on the web and TED Talks and everything, introduce Ikigai as this sort of miracle solution to the purpose of life. Well, this is the single reason why Japanese are happy, and this is their purpose of life, and if you can adopt this, you'll be happy and live long. And well, first of all, nothing's that easy. Like such a complex issue can't be solved that easily. And second off, I then continued to do some research. I watched some more TED Talks, some more videos. I did some just general research, I guess. And I found another book called The Little Book of Ikigai, which I think is very appropriate because I think the Japanese concept of Ikigai relates closely to the phenomenon on how people perceive Ikigai relates closely to the phenomena and the trend that was like a couple of years ago of Hygge from Denmark. And being from Denmark myself, there's something to relate to there, and there's some parallels I can draw, and then from that some conclusions I can take. So I'm hoping to shed some light on this and hopefully come to some conclusions, or at least be more clear with myself about why I think what I think about Ikigai and what I think we can learn from it and what I think we should take from it. And so I'm going to start by tackling the one Venn diagram I've seen most, the one thing I've seen most when researching Ikigai, and that's a Venn diagram that showcases 4 different aspects of life: something you're good at or can get good at, something you can get paid for, something that the world needs, and something that makes you happy. And then there are 4 intersections, and then the 5th intersection with every single one of those aspects is your Ikigai. And just the 4 intersections were, I'm not sure I can remember these exactly, but if you're paid at it and the world needs it, if you can get paid for it and you're good at it, that's your profession. Your mission is the world needs it and it makes you happy. your passion is something you're good at and something that makes you happy. It's vocation is the last one, I think. Either way, it doesn't much matter, because what I want to discuss is that these 4 circles combined, the intersection of all 4 circles is then supposed to be Ikigai. What do I want to build? Ikigai is then something you're good at or can get good at, something you love, something the world needs, and something you can get paid a decent pay for. And then that's supposed to be some kind of revelation, I guess. Oh, well, if you can just find what these 4 aspects, what one thing they have in common, go do that and you'll be happy. Well, yeah, no shit. That's part of the equation, is that you're happy doing it. It's not... Look, if it was this easy, if you could just say, oh, well, what makes me happy and what I can get paid for, like, there's lots... The concept of living and working your passion has been discussed so much in the entrepreneurial circles, at least the like wish entrepreneur, the people who want to be entrepreneurs. The concept of living your passion is discussed so much, like it's not a new concept. So, and at the same time, when you read like these books I've read, they come with a bunch of examples of Ikigai that the world doesn't need. Like if your life's purpose has to be something the world needs, how do you judge that? What does the world need? Because in the Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life, they go to Ogimi in Okinawa, Japan, where she's a island with a large concentration of centenarians, people over 100. And they ask them, because apparently Ikigai is very ingrained into Ikigai is ingrained into the Japanese culture. And so but especially on that island, and they ask the different centenarians, well, okay, what's your Ikigai? And one of them answers, holding her great granddaughter or something similar. Ridiculous. I mean, it's a way of showcasing how old she is, surprisingly, and then the love of her family. But if she didn't, like, the world wouldn't lose anything if she didn't hold her great granddaughter. Her family would, sure, but the world as a whole wouldn't suffer. The world doesn't need her to do that. So that doesn't fit that criteria. At the same time, she kind of gone through her whole life with an Ikigai of, oh, I want to hold my great granddaughter. It has to have changed at some point. She has to have had an Ikigai earlier in life, before her great granddaughter got born, and now holding her great granddaughter is what makes her happy and what she lives for. And now it suddenly makes a lot more sense, because in Ogimi, how they would translate Ikigai is, well, what makes them wake up in the morning, like their reason for getting up out of bed. And it makes a lot more sense, because, okay, well, sure, our reasons for getting out of bed can change. It doesn't have to have some major world impact. It can, sure. I mean, it's great if you positively impact the world, but it's not a requirement for getting out of bed. And suddenly the concept of Ikigai makes a lot more sense in that context. So I don't think the Venn diagram is a good diagram, because it just presents Ikigai as, well, this is your purpose. This is why you were put on Earth. And if people could figure out what their purpose was just by breaking it into 4 different sections, then everyone would be living their purpose already. and there wouldn't be any issue. There wouldn't be problems. So I realized this, and I started looking for other books, and then I found the little book of Ikigai, yeah, the little book of Ikigai. And as I listened to this, it didn't represent Ikigai as some miracle purpose of life. It just represented it as, well, it had it made it suddenly a lot more complex, and that makes me happy because it represented 4 or 5 pillars of Ikigai, and said, well, okay, these are the pillars, and they're what go into Ikigai, and they're why like, and then comes with a lot of different Japanese cultures or cultural things, and says, okay, well, here's a cultural thing, here's how it relates to the Japanese concept of Ikigai, here's how everything like relates to each other, here's how these pillars work into different cultural aspects of that country. And he brought up a lot of interesting points, and I'm getting this sense, and that's where I started getting the sense that, okay, well, maybe Ikigai is very much like Hygge. And okay, being Danish and seeing the Hygge trend blow up was weird as hell. It is. Oh, and if someone doesn't, like, if you guys don't know what Hygge is, it's Huga, however the hell you want to pronounce it. Apparently no one can figure it out. It was weird watching Hygge explode. It was weird seeing people have their own interpretations of the concept. And I understand why, because if I had to try and explain it to someone, I can't. Like, if I had to explain in English Hygge, like, what the word means, it's not that simple because, well, okay, first of all, we use it in billions. Well, okay, fair enough. Let's not over exaggerate, but like tons of different contexts. First of all, we use it ironically, but let's not consider that. We use it as, well, if I had to describe a Hygge setting, I'd say you sit around a fireplace with cocoa and blankets and with people you care about, and you just talk. It's a relaxing, mindful setting. But it's not some miracle purpose, not some miracle cure to happiness. It's not the sole reason why Danish people are happy. It just, like, because the thing is, that's the setting I imagine when I think of Hygge. But ever since the trend exploded, I've been so aware of how I use the word. Someone's gonna go, like, say they'll go, like, someone tells me they're gonna go play paintball with a bunch of friends. I'll be like, oh, Hygge. Like, I use the same word for paintball as I use for coziness and blankets, not cocoa. We use the word in so many different contexts, and it's not out of place. It makes sense. It just means nice. I don't know. You can't explain it because, well, if you're deliberately making something Hygge, it's one thing, but everything else is, it's just having fun, enjoying life, I guess. Is the best way I can explain it. But watching people completely butcher and misinterpret and change the meaning to like try and fit into other Western cultures, I was cringing every time I watched someone try and understand the concept, because it's not so simple. Like, so I think Ikigai is the same. That's why I'm happy that the author of A Little Book of Ikigai wrote it as a response to The Little Book of Hygge, because the correlations are clear. Like, they're both concepts that are supposedly used in everyday, like words that are used in everyday life, and now they're being presented as some kind of miracle word and concept in that country that somehow makes the country better than everyone else. And sure, there's good things you can draw from the concepts, but they're just words. I mean, I guess there's something to be said for if a word is said a lot, there's a meaning behind it. That was a theory actually mentioned in The Little Book of Ikigai. He said that, okay, well, if a concept is very ingrained into a culture, that concept will most likely be describable or be single word, and it'll be used a lot. And yeah, that matches the description of both Hygge and Ikigai, I guess, at least according to the author, but he's Japanese, so I gonna assume he knows what he's talking about. So saying it's just a word, I guess, isn't an excuse, it's not an answer. Because there's a lot of things I guess we can learn from words, single words, and the meaning in cultures. But Ikigai is getting represented as this purpose, like it's the purpose of life. Like, this is a word used every day in Japan, and it's just the purpose of life. Like, it's a huge concept. Like, it's extremely complicated. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I mean, from what I got from the Little Book of Ikigai, and I believe this is the better book in regards to learning about Ikigai. Is he brought up 5 pillars. One of them was sustainability. One of them was starting small. Don't remember the other ones. And then he talked about these different concepts, and I think if you want to understand Ikigai, it's a fair idea to go through these ideas, or these cultural parts of Japan. So he talked about sumo, and the culture sumo is a lot more complex than I thought it was. Apparently it's a long career choice. You'll go to a stable where you're trained every day. You'll do chores. You're provided food and shelter, and then you focus your entire energy into sumo training and becoming better at sumo. And then hold on. And then after 5 years, you can look at where you are and say, okay, am I happy with where I am? Do I want to continue pursuing my sumo career? Do I want to go look for another career? or am I not sure? And they outline different. They give you different options. Like if you're unsure, you get a year's consideration period where you'll just stay in the stable. You'll be presented with a couple different choices, like of what you could do if you choose to leave sumo, and you still get food and shelter, and so you're secure. But in these stables, like, your entire energy has to be focused into. It is a farm for deep work and focus and flow. You put everything you can into becoming a better sumo wrestler. Everything is built around that. The diet, the routines, the chores, everything. And he then brought up this one person, this one sumo wrestler he didn't have a great track record. He wasn't winning a lot. He didn't have success, and yet he's still doing it. And he mentioned this one ceremony in sumo of bow tying. Sorry if I got that wrong. Twirling the bow, maybe. Where, God damn it, where it's part of the ceremony, and he mentioned that this one guy's Ikigai, why he still stayed in sumo, was because that part of the ceremony was his reason for being. Like, it's his reason for getting up in the morning. It's his reason for continuing in the sumo career, because that's what he enjoys. Because it's the sumo wrestlers who do it. So if he wants to do it, he has to continue as a sumo wrestler. What the hell? Oh, that's cool. And I thought that was important, because suddenly, like, sumo isn't his reason for life. It's not his purpose. Bow twirling isn't something that makes a major impact on the world. If he doesn't do it, someone else will. But it's what made him happy, and it's a little thing. It's a small thing that he enjoyed, and it's the highlight of his day. It's the highlight of his year, or whatever. And he's willing to go through rigorous and hard training in sumo wrestling just to do that. And I guess now it suddenly sounds a lot like it's a purpose of life again, right? It's something you'll go through heaven and hell to get and to do. In Western culture, there's a bit of talk about what's the purpose of life? Why are we put here? And everything like that. It's not a lot, but there's a fair bit. It's not something that's discussed on a daily basis, for sure. By an average person, that is. So what is the Western idea of a purpose of life? Well, in my mind, it's I'd describe it as like the reason God put you on this earth. I'm not religious, but that would be it. So in my mind, it's not the reason In my mind, it's some higher purpose. Like Jesus was put on earth to get rid of sin or absorb the sin of the humans. And then it's, all the talk about God has a higher plan for all of us, and etc. etc. It's all part of the plan. I really hate that argument, but it's essentially that. It's what is our piece in the plan. It's if you imagine a game of chess, the pawn doesn't, very rarely wins the game. It's not the piece that kills the king. But it might be a sacrifice for a higher purpose. I'm not saying people are put on earth to be sacrificed. God forbid. God forbid. Just don't do human sacrifice. What I'm trying to say is the piece is there, and it's used strategically to, okay, well, let's say a knight, or it's the pawn is put in place so that either it gets destroyed or it's in the way, and it probably doesn't get to kill a major piece itself or eliminate one, but instead it forces the enemy to sacrifice one of their larger pieces. And so that's my concept of purpose of life. It's, well, what's your purpose? What is your part of what's your piece of the puzzle? Why do you matter in the grand scheme of things? That's at least how I perceive the Western idea of purpose of life. Oh, cool. But that's not. Okay. Let's try to go through it this way. That is my perception of how Western society understands purpose of life. If that is true, how does that relate to Ikigai? Well, let's go with the Venn diagram. It's what the world needs. It's for some like minor major reason, it's what the world needs. But that doesn't mean it makes you happy. Just because you have an obligation to do it doesn't mean it makes you happy to do it. And I say obligation because if there's such a thing as some purpose of life and you have some grander purpose and you're here to make an impact of some kind, well then you have an obligation to do that, because that then steers the world in the right way. And the world is going to go into chaos if people give up their obligations and their responsibilities. We live on the power of regular people and their small deeds every day. I think that's what makes the difference in the world, because each small thing additively will go up to become a large thing. What the hell's the hole there? That's something I'll have to consider for another time. But you don't have to be happy for it. I think it's just your obligation to do it at that point, and you'll do it because you know it matters. And if you don't know what your purpose of life is, how the hell are you supposed to do it? Like, are you just okay, yeah, let's discuss that. That's a good. If, let's presume, because I'm making an assumption here. I'm making an assumption that your purpose of life, let's say there's some God, some omniscient God that puts you on the planet for a specific purpose to do a specific thing. Cool. Now let's say that we're pursuing that reason. We want to figure out why so we can do it. So my assumption here is that our purpose is something we have to actively do with effort, instead of something we'll just do passively by existing. And I'm making that assumption because if it's something we have to do passively, it's not something we have to put effort into, and we just exist, then figuring out what the purpose of life is meaningless. If I'm going to do something just by existing, I don't need to know what that is that I'm going to do, and I don't need to know why, because it's going to happen nonetheless. And then this whole discussion is rendered null. Like this, it doesn't matter anymore. So good. That's out of the way. So our purpose of life, I guess it's technically possible that we just do it passively. But then what we do in life doesn't matter. Nothing we do then matters. Like, actions have no consequences. Everything happens for their own reasons, etc. So, at the very least for some of us, we have to figure out what the purpose of life, what our purpose is, what our reason for getting up in the morning is, so that we can fulfill it, so that we can actively do our part. So, okay, we're going to work under the assumption that what we have to do is something, our purpose of life is something we have to actively do. Working under that assumption, we then have to figure out what it is. And that does seem like an impossible task if you consider the idea that some omniscient God has put us there, and we will never know as much as, like, per definition, we'll never be omniscient. It's impossible. I'm not sure where I was going with this. let's backtrack. We're trying to figure out what the difference is between Ikigai and purpose of life and whether they're the same. Oh yeah, I know. I was arguing why you don't have to be happy for your purpose of life in the Western sense, but it's Ikigai is represented as something that happiness and doing in is a very important part of Ikigai. So yes, my point is, for the Western part, it's an obligation. We have to do it for the betterment of the world. It's a responsibility each person carries. And that would then be disproven, because if it's something we do passively, it's not a responsibility because it happens no matter what. So I had to argue for why it's done actively. It's something we have to do actively instead of passively. And so the purpose of life isn't a passive thing, so that means it is an active thing. And if it's an active thing, we need to figure out what it is, because otherwise we can't do it. If we then figure out what it is, know what we have to do, and our role in the big puzzle, then we also have a responsibility to fulfill that part of the puzzle. We have to have a responsibility to do our part if we know what our part is. And I think most people could agree with that, right? If we know how our existence improves the world, then we should have a responsibility to do exactly that. I don't think that's an unfair assumption to make, or a statement to make. So that's the difference, because yeah, as I said, happiness is presented as a very Jesus Christ, important part of Ikigai. And if it's an important part of Ikigai, there's a cave. What the hell is happening? Piss off. Oh, emeralds. Is there a thing here? Maybe. And in the Western sense, happiness isn't part of the equation. You might become happy doing what you making an impact. Oh, hey, diamonds. You might be happy feeling like you make an impact, but it's not a requirement to do it. I'm getting screwed over here. So I don't think they're the same. And this goes into if both the books I read, both the Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life and the Little Book of Ikigai, I get the impression that Ikigai isn't a thing, a purpose, active, but a philosophy. It's a philosophy of how to live your life. Both of them spent a lot of time talking about mindfulness and living in the moment. And especially one of them spent a lot of time outlining why Japanese they in Western society, work is seen as a necessary evil, brought upon us by the original sin. It's built into our, like, that's non-arguable because it's built into our belief structures, built into our main religion, Christianity. So you're not going to argue with me that that's not the case. With the concept of Ikigai, you live in the moment, you take small steps, you find enjoyment in work. That was the most revealing thing I got from the little book of Ikigai, is that get enjoyment from what you do instead of thinking of it as a necessary evil. It represented this exactly this way, and I think that's very important. It's an extremely important distinction to make between the Japanese concept of idea of work and the Western idea of work, or Christian idea of work, whatever. We do not work because we want to. We work because we have to. In the West. And the feeling I keep getting from Ikigai is that, well, the philosophy of Ikigai isn't find your purpose of life, find what you're put on earth to be. No. Find enjoyment in what you do. And yet, don't give up. Well, I guess that's something I've added myself. But I keep getting the sense that, well, you just have to find enjoyment in what you do. Whether you're a sumo wrestler living for the boat twirling, or an office worker. Live in the here and now and enjoy what you do. Get into flow. Flow was discussed in both books. And an important part of flow is that, honestly, I haven't researched the concept a lot, but at least it's presented to me that an important part of flow is being happy in the moment and while you're doing it, enjoying being in flow. Being in flow is supposed to be good and enjoyable. And so if an important part of Ikigai is that you're in flow while you're doing your Ikigai, then you're also happy while doing it. And so taking the bus, find something enjoyable. Or working in an office, find something enjoyable. Like, learn to just enjoy the small things in life. And you can have multiple things you can enjoy. Okay, so my timer has gone off. And I'm going to try and wrap up a conclusion, or at least wrap it up. Ikigai isn't the Western idea of a purpose of life, because if we're supposed to believe the Venn diagram, happiness is an important part of it, and in the Western sense, happiness isn't part of purpose of life. At least I'd argue for that. I believe purpose of life is a responsibility, and purpose of life is also something that's hard to do. It's something that requires a lot of struggle. And per Christianity, work is a necessary evil, not something to be enjoyed. So that's why they aren't the same. But then what is Ikigai? I don't think it's something I could truly, honestly, ever try to explain just from reading books. Ever try to understand. Because this is why I discussed the whole Hygge thing. Being Danish, I understand what the word means instinctively. But I wouldn't ever be able to explain it properly. And I'm 90% sure that Ikigai is the exact same case. It's something so ingrained into Japanese culture that it's just inexplainable. Like, you can't understand it without living it. and understanding the language and speaking the language and being in the culture, experiencing Ikigai yourself. So it's not some miracle cure. It's not the purpose of life, because those are different things. But what you can do is that you can try to find enjoyment in small things. And you can try and get into flow. And not think of work as a necessary evil. I think those are the biggest takeaways from Ikigai. We certainly didn't get far, but this is a complicated issue. And I'll maybe revisit this at another time when I have a better understanding. I am learning Japanese, so maybe once I've visited Japan or understand the language better, I might have a better understanding, have read about flow and other things. But for now, this is as far as I can get on this issue, I think. If you guys did enjoy this, please do leave a thumbs up. Press the thumbs up. If you didn't, press the thumbs down. Dear God. I do want to know if I'm doing something wrong. If you have anything to add, any of your own thoughts, put them in the comments. Look, we're all here to learn. We're all here to figure out this together. And if you want to see more discussions like this, I'll keep playing on this exact same game. I'll quit now and then pick up from where I left off, and I'll try to... I don't know what I'll talk about. I'll figure it out. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll hope to see you next time.